There we go. All right. So I got a few things that I want to kind of go through. It's not PHP programming per se, but I do want to point out certain classes that you might want to consider. Okay, because you're in this class, which means you have expressed a certain level of interest in programming and in scripting. So you might be interested in some of these other classes. The first one is CISP 300. Let me see if I can find out the description of that class. The schedule should have it. So I'm going to go to the schedule and just point out a few classes that you might want to consider for spring, 2018. Because many of these classes are full semester classes you can't add at this point. And frankly, you don't need those for this class, but in order to really help you crank out PHP code or any type of web scripts, these other classes will be very helpful. So we go to class schedule. This is 2017 spring, but those classes you can search for those classes next semester. So we go to CISP. The first class that you might want to consider is CISP 300. And you can see the description is it introduces methods of solving typical computer problems, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what you have been doing in this class? Okay, you're writing scripts, right? You're trying to write web scripts. That is a computer problem because you're trying to make your web server to crank out dynamic content based on logic. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so I took this class last spring and I passed it.
Mm-hmm.
What part is this having to do with the PHP? Is this you said the logic base of how it runs, or what's?
Now this class. Okay, may I ask where did you take it?
Here with
Here?
Fox.
With Fox. Yeah. Okay, so P300 is supposed to introduce the control structures. So the concept of a while loop versus a do while loop, okay. Those concepts should be covered. Conditional statements like if, else, that should be covered. Boolean expressions and operators like and or not, that should be covered. The concept of arrays, but only using numeric indexes, should be covered. So all of those things are helpful because if you have not been exposed to those concepts before, the things that we are doing is like, is way, 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 difficult. So CISP 300, kind of prepares you for that. But it will also talk about subroutines, right? It talks about, subroutines or functions. It will talk about passing parameters and stuff like that. So all of those are common topics for any type of programming. Just about any type, I shouldn't say every type, but almost every single type of programming would involve those concepts. So we may not be able to see the connection like right now because we're dealing with fairly simple code at this point. But as our code gets more complicated and we have to use subroutines, we have to break a big chunk of code into smaller chunks, that class will come in handy. Okay? So the ordering doesn't have to be P300 and then W410. It can be reversed. Okay? Some people take the 410 class first, this class, and then they go like, well, but I want to learn more about how to break up the logic of a particular code into smaller chunks so it's easy to maintain and so on. People go back and take CISP 300. So it's a good class to help reinforce the concepts that you have learned already in this class, but it also helps you develop the skills and also the problem-solving skills to analyze bigger problems, things that are bigger than what we're dealing with here. Yep?
What language do you use in that class?
It is supposed to be neutral. It is supposed to be pseudocode, so it's not even something you can run on a computer. But it depends on who's teaching it. This is a new faculty, Shortcut. She's a new faculty, so she's taking on like 4 sections of these classes. I used to teach this class a lot, a few years back, but now I'm teaching the next one. You can see CISP 310. I'm teaching 2 sections of those. So that's one, CISP 300. The next one, now we haven't really gotten into SQL at all.
So the software, how much is it used these days? Like if using it, teaching us how many language, but where would people use it?
In 310, so this is off topic, right? So in 310, I teach computer architecture and assembly language programming. But my focus is to look inside the processor and break it up into the components like the ALU, the registers, and how everything is coordinated in order for the processor to be able to execute instructions. So my focus is not so much the assembly language itself, it is how everything relates inside the processor. But this is off topic, okay? You guys do not need to know assembly language programming for web scripting, okay? But the other class that you might want to consider, later on we will be introduced to SQL, is database programming. Database programming is kind of specific to, at this point, is specific to Oracle, okay? Yeah. But Oracle is just. Yeah, but that's just one of the many database engines to make use of SQL as a query language. So if you master, Oracle SQL in this class, it is a very quick and easy change to make use of MySQL, to make use of PostgreSQL, and so on, because they are all SQL. Now, do they have differences? Yes. Okay, I experienced firsthand. My MySQL script would not run in PostgreSQL.
Yeah, but if you learn join, then the join is a join. So.
Exactly, the concept doesn't change. The syntax may change a little bit, or the way you nest things may have to change a little bit. That's what I found, was MySQL allows a certain type of nesting that Postgres doesn't like. Okay, reformat, okay, change it, but the concept doesn't change. Okay. So this is a good class too, especially if your web content is driven by a database, okay, which is most websites these days. Okay, so most websites these days, have the content of the web front being driven with being what we call data driven by a backend database. So CRSP 350 would also be a good class to consider. Does it have a prerequisite? Nope. As an advisory of CISC 310, which is just your introduction to computer science, if you're in this class, I don't think you will need to take CISC 310 first before taking CISP 350. Go ahead.
I'm in that class now, and it's very straightforward, very easy coding language. Mm-hmm. The Oracle, the SQL, and the.
It does get complicated later. Because if you're talking about a single level of select and you're just selecting based on a particular easy filter, it's not too difficult. But when you get to join operations, especially left, right, and outer joins, things get a little bit.
We're not there yet,
difficult. But I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm just saying that in a realistic setting, like what you said earlier, right? The project for this class, the final project for this class involves the joining of 4 tables. Okay, but you guys just saw my script, and all those inner joins, right? And then the filtering, and then using a select inside another select statement and stuff like that. This class may get into some of that, but may not be all of those. Okay, but realistic websites, typically have a lot of tables, and many times you have to join 6, 7 tables easily. Okay, that's just the way things are structured in a database-driven application. So these 2 classes, I think, will be really, really good stuff for you guys to consider. And then, for those of you who are really, really adventurous, okay, check this out. Check out Firebase from Google. Now, Firebase, inside Firebase is, there's a database component to it, but it's not relational. Okay, and then people go, oh, but relational is the state of the art. Every database should be relational database. Well, that's not the case. This is big data. These databases are designed to handle not megabytes, not gigabytes, but terabytes and petabytes of data. So they are not organized the same way as a relational database.
Intentionally, so they unnormalize the data for the stream.
They actually denormalize.
Right, exactly.
They put things, duplicate items everywhere, which is a big no-no when it comes to relational database design, because we want things to be elegant, everything has to be normalized, everything should appear only once, right? Not so with big data. So why is this a big deal? Why are we going the opposite route and not making things relational anymore?
Because the sheer quantity of data.
The sheer quantity of data is one. Okay, very good.
And maybe less
Space.
less verbose than
Well,
when you're doing a query.
Okay, what is the constraint these days? In other words,
Speed.
speed of what? Network speed,
Querying.
hard drive speed,
Also the I/O.
processing speed,
Memory.
The I/O
memory.
speed.
What is the constraint? We have gobs and gobs of storage now.
Is
Okay.
the I/Os, input output processing. So basically, you're reading, writing. So if you're reading,
That's one.
You're reading 15 different tables, then you're doing
Mhm.
15 reads.
But what is a join operation? Now, we have not talked about the join
That's
operations
logical
yet,
process.
but I do want to just kind of quickly introduce that so that you guys understand, what the limitation is. A join operation is taking two tables and trying to match the fields.
Right.
Okay, this field matches that one. Oh, okay, these two things. Okay, put them together. This one matches that one. Put them together. This one matches that one. Put them together. That can only be done sequentially. So if you have 20 gazillion processors, it's not going to help you. Okay? Big data, on the other hand, is designed so that you can spread out your database to 20 gazillion computers, and they can all operate in parallel, each one solving a smaller sub-problem of the big problem. So the more processor you have, the more nodes you have in the cluster, the faster it can go. It can truly utilize the available processing power in the data center. A relational database has bottlenecks, where you can have 20 cores. It's not going to help you, because everything has to funnel through that one single matching engine that cannot be parallelized. So that's why people are now moving away from relational databases. Doesn't mean relational databases are useless. It simply means that there are alternatives now. And Firebase, the database engine within Firebase, is one of those things. Okay, it's a big data type of database. So the way it is structured is different. The way you have access control is entirely different. Okay? The other part of Firebase may interest you as well. If you're dealing with a website that requires authentication, okay, what website doesn't need authentication? Every website wants authentication. Why? It's not for your security. It's for them to track you. Once you authenticate, your browser will keep a cookie, right?
Yeah.
And everywhere you go, that cookie goes with you. So the website can now track you. Where are you going after this, after this, after this, and so on. So when you're dealing with a lot of data-driven web applications, they all want authentication. So when you have authentication, typically you will have a link for people to set up a new account, right? So set up a new account, what is your username? That has been taken. Try another one, taken. Try another one, taken. So these days people get smarter, they use email addresses, right? But then you will still be able to, you will still have to ask a password for your site. How many different passwords can you remember for all the different things that you go into?
Not that many.
Not that many. So we start to reuse the same passwords,
Exactly.
right? Which is also not a very good idea. Okay? This has an authentication engine. It uses, you can use Facebook, Google, or GitHub, okay, identities to sign in. So if you already have a Gmail account, you can have a particular website to make use of the Google authentication process, so that you don't have to deal with all of that stuff. Okay? The entire authentication process is offloaded from your website. And then the client, whoever is using your website, does not have to come up with a new password just to get into your website, because it is using the Google Gmail identity to get into your website. It is very easy to track from your end. Firebase also has a notification engine. In other words, if there's something happening to the database, it meets a certain condition, you can fire a rule. And the rule can say, I need to notify these people over here about this. So typically, you need to run your own website with a cron job to do something like that. With Firebase, you can attach your code to the database itself to trigger the broadcast of the messages. So it offers a lot of stuff that traditionally requires that you own a web server, you manage your own database, you manage your own cron jobs, and so on. You don't need your own server anymore with this approach. So I'm not a spokesperson for Google. I'm not getting any kickback whatsoever. I just have used it, on certain things, and I found that, hey, this is convenient. Okay, it is, it still uses a little bit of coding, so you can use PHP coding, so stuff that you learn in this class will still be used. It also uses JavaScript for coding. So look into it. They have tons of video clips, that will give you an idea of what it can do. Okay, I don't think this is the right time or the right class to really get in there and say, okay, let's go talk about Firebase programming and stuff like that. But if you watch the video, you will get a sense of what you can do with that product. Now, if Google comes up with this product and it's really useful, guess what? There'll be competitions. Amazon will come up with its own version of doing something like that, and so on. So the idea is to understand what the current state of the art is and what it can do for you. Now, this class is still important because we still have to understand the basics first before we move on to something like that. But keep in mind that your PHP coding is not necessarily what you want to use to build an application. There are other products that can make it happen. Yep?
I took this class with the assumption that this class will teach me to access databases and server side.
And we will do that.
Yeah, so that is my assumption. From JavaScript class.
Yep.
We're using
That is exactly what we will do in this class. So we'll basically be formatting SQL queries and have those queries to send from PHP to a MySQL database, get the result back from MySQL database, and then you can use PHP code to make it look good. You can format the whole thing into a table if you want to, and then it becomes a big HTML document that has all the nice formatting and whatnot. So we will get there. So we'll definitely get there as well. That's in fact one of the final project is that. But I do want to kind of give you if you zoom out, okay, this is the big picture. Yes, things are evolving very quickly.
Because I got lost in JavaScript and actually dropped out because of that, so I will learn that portion.
I think I'm going to start a forum, soon, maybe tonight, so that for those of you who want to, you can kind of, contribute and say why you're in this class, what you're trying to learn, and how you want to apply what you're learning in this class. Like, my job is involving blah, 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 and I need to learn how to do it. Or, this is just my personal interest, or I just want to kind of keep up with technology just in case I need to know how to do stuff like that in my job. So, I might start up a forum, would anyone be interested? If you guys say, I'm not interested, I'm not going to start a forum. Okay. So that would be good because that really helps me too, because it really helps me to cater the content of this class to meet those requirements. Does that make any sense? Okay. Now, obviously, if it's really vary, like all the way from here to here, it makes it very difficult for me to meet every single level. But if it's kind of like this, I can cater the content of this class using Professor Lever's homework assignment, but explain it in a certain way so that you guys can use it almost right away in whatever application that you might have. Is that okay? So I think we are catching up with the deadlines of the homework assignments. Is that okay? Do you guys feel kind of comfortable, or?
I don't know yet.
You don't know yet?
Try this code out.
Because at this point, we are really just, this one is done. And so if you are comfortable, nope, not this one. It's the loop one. If you guys are comfortable with the loop homework assignment, okay, where did I put that? There we go. So if you guys are comfortable with the loop homework assignment, we have a few more to go, just one more, then we have caught up. Okay, we have pretty much caught up with the schedule. Good job.
So are you said that you're going to push this homework,
The conditional one, I'm going to push the deadline to tomorrow.
Okay.
So you have the entire tomorrow to turn it in.
Until.
Tomorrow midnight.
The entire tomorrow.
Until midnight, okay.
Yeah, as long as it says, what is today's date?
5978.
As long as it says September 8th, it's okay.
Okay.
Pacific time. So booking a flight to Hawaii is not going to help you. Okay, so I do want to go through this one last one, dice game, just so that to make sure that we can catch up and everybody has a good starting point with the loop homework assignment. So the dice game says, right here, download and unzip this particular file. Has 6 pictures of a dice, okay, so that you don't have to find those pictures yourself. Or you're welcome to use your own if you want. You're going to create a dice game. Generate 4 random numbers between 1 and 6. These will represent the 4 rows of the dice. Now, at this point, it doesn't say anything about how you are going to store the random numbers. You have 4 of these things, okay? So 4 individual variables or an array of 4 items. Which one is more general? Which one gives you the flexibility and go, oh, we can go through each number and do something about it?
In an array.
In an array. Very good. Okay, so you guys are starting to think and apply what you have learned. Okay, because things in an array gives you the flexibility. By changing the index, you can say, I want this one, I want that one. Okay? Create 2 totals with these numbers, player total and house total. Okay, so you have the totals, probably you do not want to use an array of 2 items because they are very distinct in this case. Create an array of the 6 images. Okay, so this one definitely is an array of the 6 images in the dice folder. Okay, so you want to create, now this is a little bit confusing. It is not an array of the 6 images, it is an array of the file names of the images. URLs, file names, paths, okay? I recommend, okay, in the dice folder, since your random number of between 1 and 6 and array start with 0, I recommend that you leave the 0 spot in an array blank. Just put quote here. Okay. I'm not so sure about that. Okay, you can always change the index, okay, before you get there.
That's good.
Yep. Display images for the first 2 player dice rolls and the 2 house dice rolls using the graphics and post their totals. So you will throw the dice. Okay, I'm having a brain fart here. Create 2 totals with these numbers. Create an array of the 6 images. Display images for the 2 player dice rolls. So there will be 2 rows for a player. Is that right? And then the house would roll the dice twice as well. And you want to display the images. So are you displaying 4 dice images?
Yeah.
The first and the second for the player, the first and the second for the house. Okay. And post their results, post their total, so you have to add up the numbers. Declare the winner of the game. You must account for a tie game, so that means you have to do a comparison of the total. If they match, it's 1 condition, there's 1 branch for that. If the house wins, there's 1 branch for that. If the player wins, there's 1 branch for that. So there are 3 branches altogether when you compare the totals. Loop portion. There should be 3 games visible when the page loads. Look at the example. My table is actually made up only of 4 rows. I simply have these 4 rows being printed inside the loop that runs 3 times. Okay, so the loop structure is a for loop. Inside each iteration, you create the 4 random numbers, and 2 random numbers would be the players, 2 random numbers would be the house. So you want to create the 2 totals out of those 4 random numbers. Create the array of images. In other words, you're creating an array of names of the images. Okay? Write your print statement to show the images and the totals, and then write the statement to see who wins. Okay, so I think I get it now. But I'm not sure about the loop. When do we get out of the loop?
In here, that's
Go through it 3 times.
It goes to 3 times.
Oh, okay. So you just have basically there are 3 runs of the game. Okay, got it. So do we know what to do with this one? Because it looks kind of okay.
Okay. I think we need to see a video.
Okay, what about this? Okay, since I got my document camera still running, I can give you an idea of what your page may look like. Okay, so switch to that. There we go. So each page, okay, now I'm really bad at designing web pages, and yet I'm teaching this class.
Yeah, this class is neat design.
Well, I can do the control part, I can do the programming part.
That's all we need for this.
Okay, so what you need is basically you have player, and then you have 2 images to reflect the 2 dice rolls for the player. And then you display a total corresponding to those 2 particular rows, right? And then you have one for house, which is the same thing, 2 images to reflect the 2 rows, a total, and then at the end, right here, you will say, who wins.
You win, you lose, whatever.
You win, you lose, or it's a tie,
Yeah.
and then do this 3 times.
I have a question.
Yep.
So for the images, are we generating a random number, or we're putting a number to each image?
We are generating our own image. Excuse me, we are generating the numbers, the random numbers, but then you're pulling the images that is already provided here.
Okay, so the image has a random number associated with the image.
Let's take a look at the zip file.
The image and everything will be changed.
Different names.
So I'm suspecting there's a pattern to the name of the images.
Like 1, 2, 3, 4.
That would be what I think is the case. Oh, this is not the local machine. This is really funny because there was one time, because I run a lot of virtual machines, to do the other things that I need to do, like teaching the other classes. So it's not uncommon that I would have a terminal open in a virtual machine to do something. And then at the end of using a virtual machine, instead of just clicking the close button, which is the same thing as pulling the plug, I would do the proper thing and just say power off, okay, to shut down the virtual machine. And there was one time I was on power as root, as the administrator, and then I forgot that I was on power, and then I turned power off. I turned off the power server for that entire day until the next day, at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. I tried to get back here as early as I possibly could so that we could restart the server. The good thing was when I did that, it was 2 a.m.
Okay.
So nobody actually noticed. Okay, so let's get back to this one. This is the last thing we're gonna do today. So we'll go ahead and unzip the dice one, 140911745, blah blah blah. Here we go. So there you go.
Okay.
So the dices have a file name that is kind of corresponding to it. So there are several ways to do this. You can change the index, okay? So you can do that trick, okay? So that you change the indexes back to 0 to 5 instead of 1 to 6. So there are many ways to kind of fix that problem. I don't particularly like to leave the first item, the item at index 0 empty, because all programming languages that I know of start counting from 0 in arrays.
Yeah.
So you might want to adjust the logic or the calculation of the numbers just a little bit, just so that you don't leave the first item of the array empty.
Maybe we use the file name as I+1.
Yeah. So you can parameterize the digit of the file name,
Yeah.
which basically means when you need to store the file name into the array, you just use double quotes, okay? Double quote dice, dollar, and then some variable dot png, and then you just have to make sure that that particular variable has a range from 1 to 6. Okay? Is that okay? So that really kind of concludes the entire homework assignment that's due next week. So yeah, go ahead.
He wants you to run the game 3 times?
Yeah. Yeah, so you have a for loop that only has to go through something 3 times. So just count 0, 1, 2, exit.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I think earlier today, our loops iterate through exactly 3 times.
You missed that.
Wow. You can just copy and paste that particular structure into your program. So are we doing okay so far? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you guys have any questions, just send an email to me through Canvas, and I will add some forums too. I'll add some forums just to collect information of why you're here in this class, and specifically what you want to get out of the class. So this way I can kind of cater the content. It might be helpful. If you don't want to mention that, it's okay. Just text me instead of putting in the forum. But it will be helpful for me to know your background. Especially, do you have programming background? Have you done scripting before? This is your second class, dealing with PHP. That would be helpful because addressing a class where most people have some programming background, as opposed to a class where no one has any programming background, is very different. And I can tell that some of you already have some programming background, but I don't know about the entire class. Yep. Question? Nope. Okay. All right. So
there
that's
was an initial form that answered some of those questions already.
Okay.
I think he took it off.
Yeah, I took it off because I'm not using it for grading purposes. So we might need to repeat that information here.
Okay, but it's still accessible. I looked at it.
Okay, then I'll check it. All right. Well, thank you for showing up. Have a nice weekend.
Hey, I just wanted to say, so about the bracket question, after you answered it, I realized that I was like, wait a minute, you didn't teach me that, I taught me that. I was like writing out my code and somebody on the internet was like, you should use brackets. And I'm like, you're right, where did I get that habit from? And I just immediately assumed I got it here, but I think I'm the one who taught myself that habit, so you're good.
Oh, okay, no problem. No worries.
All right. Well, have a nice day.
Okay, you too. Have a nice weekend. It's Thursday already.
My weekend starts now.
I wish that's true for me. All right, so let me see if you guys have any questions. So did you manage to fix anything?
It's closed, but
Okay. Okay, so if it's not running, you want to know exactly what it's opening, or if it's not opening, actually, that's. Okay, so where is it? Is it this part?
this, I think this is the, this part,
Using it again?
got that, then
That's
I
right.
guess was any other program that I threw the sum equals this, and I just, I want to print this.
Okay, so you have sum times sum 1. Some num and num 1. So how many variables do we have? This is num
No
1.
one, and then
This is num. Okay, I
the
see.
thing you get is no.
Okay, gotcha. So num is the one you get. Num 1 is the random number. You get multiplication. You're missing a semicolon after that. Yeah, so that's why it comes to running on command line first. Oh. Don't touch it. You'll try the ribbon cables. Starting to disconnect. The product is. Okay, so you need a correct. Well, okay, since you're using double quote here, get rid of this double quote. Don't need that. Because if you use double quotes, it means you can refer to the value of the variable inside the double quotes, right? And you don't need that dot either, because you're not going to calculate. You're expanding the value of variables inside the quotes.
Okay, so there's more like this.
It's actually fine.
HTML move. Instead of using these to get them to move around, you have to use these.
What she said was that it should emulate exactly her page. So that, since that wasn't,
Yeah.
I figured, that meant clicking on those buttons.
Yeah, because it's like that. Yeah, I should have kind of refactored a little bit and make it right there.
Yeah, and so, I mean, when you look at the head, it had this said page 1.html. I just simply changed those to the current page and triggers.
Okay. Well,
This is separate only.
I'm including a lot of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
I did it differently. Because I'm just, this is my whole PHP thing. I'm just, because I'm pulling this from another PHP, it's an include from the PHP. I just changed the files that she had,
Right.
uploaded them, changed the .html to PHP, kicked into my thing, so I'm pulling it from the other files and put it over here, and it's doing a lot of include with everything.
So you've reconstructed the table.
And I just used,
Is it multiplication or is it addition? It's multiplication because you refer to it as a sum, so it's product.
I'm just trying to figure out
what I'm, yeah.
Okay, so this is single quote is the end, so you need to put in single quote
okay.
after the
So in
after.
okay, trigger equals 3 to 1. So
You need to close the end like this.
can I see the page 1.php?
Oh, page 1?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because I have to fix these ones.
After the sum.
Yeah, page 1.
Okay.
So you can bring it up.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I did it a funky way.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure what it emulates.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm just kind of figuring out my own way to do things. Because I just took her files, whatever it was. Is that top left, top right? Page 1 of PHP. So I just changed her stuff.
See, that's where I was thinking is like, okay, further down the menu bar, that's what I changed there to be able to stay on the page and navigate it with
do current page .php.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the trigger would be, see, the trigger also is in there. That was the code that she suggested putting in.
Ah.
Right.
Gotcha.
But it would be important.
Yeah. So this is, she gave 2 ways of doing it. This was one of them. This is one I chose. Just use one variable.
Okay, how about this?
And it also should be the default page.
I can run it on the grid.
Well, how I did it with the on my PHP page I made, that should be fine. That's not, that's because I made